Okay, let's start with a little word association game. If I say Sir Henry Parkes, what is the absolute first image that pops into your head?
For most people,
Mm,
it has to be the beard,
the beard.
that massive flowing white beard. And probably, a marble statue, the father of federation, the serious, dignified,
Slightly boring old man.
exactly, the man who birthed the nation.
Right. That's the textbook version. It's the version on the banknotes.
Yeah.
But we have been digging through a massive stack of sources, his own personal letters home to England, detailed biographies, historical breakdowns, and let me tell you, the statue version is essentially a lie.
It is.
Or at least it's a very thick coat of paint over a much messier, more chaotic reality.
It really is. I mean, the title Father of Federation suggests this stable fatherly figure. But the man we found in these sources, he's a financial disaster. He's a poet with a massive ego. He's a man of contradictions. And frankly, his life story reads less like a political biography and more like a Victorian soap opera.
A soap opera with a very high body count. And I don't mean murders, I mean descendants.
17 children.
17, that is a staggering number. So our mission for this deep dive is to chip away at that marble and find the human being underneath.
Yep.
We want to understand how a man who couldn't keep a shop open to save his life managed to unite a continent.
And to understand that contradiction, the Titan versus the bankrupt, we have to ignore the old man with a beard for a moment and look at where he came from. Because Parkes didn't arrive in Australia as a VIP.
Not at all.
He didn't arrive with a government commission. He arrived as a desperate refugee.
The sources describe him as an exile. So let's set the scene. It's 1839. Parkes is 24 years old. He's on a ship called the Strathfield, sailing into Sydney Harbor.
Huh?
What's his situation?
Desperate. I mean, completely desperate. He was born into rural poverty in Warwickshire, England. His family lost their farm to debt. By the time Henry was 8 years old, he was working in a rope walk in a brick pit. He was smashing stones on the road just to help the family buy food.
So no formal education to speak of.
Almost none. He is entirely self-taught. And by the time he gets on that boat to Australia, he has already failed at his first business attempt in England.
Wow.
He actually had to pawn his own tool chest in London just to survive while waiting for the ship.
And that voyage sounds horrific, too. The sources mention his wife, Clorinda.
Clorinda is the unsung hero of this entire saga. Just imagine this. She gives birth to their daughter, Clorinda Sarah, at sea.
At sea.
2 days before they land in Sydney, on a wooden ship in steerage in 1839.
And then they land. And you'd think, okay, new country, fresh start. But Parkes writes these letters home to his sister Sarah, and they are just gutted with misery.
Oh, yeah.
He describes the other passengers as coarse and blasphemous. He has a few coins in his pocket. He writes a poem called A Poet's Farewell, where he basically curses England for forcing him into this foreign wilderness.
He felt betrayed. He didn't want to be a pioneer. He felt like he had been kicked out of civilization.
Right.
And Sydney didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. He had to take a job as a farm laborer for Sir John Jameson, way out near Penrith.
I was reading the description of his rations in those letters home. It's burned into my brain. He complains about the beef being unfit to eat, but it was the bacon that got me. How did he describe it?
Soap and fish mixed.
Soap and fish mixed. That is a flavor profile that belongs in a horror movie, not a breakfast plate.
It paints such a vivid picture of his misery, doesn't it? He's living in a drafty hut with a sheet of bark for a bed. Their luggage was broken open and stolen.
Unbelievable.
He writes that he feels starved out and companionless, working alongside convicts. You have to remember, this is the future 5-time Premier of New South Wales. At this moment, he is at the absolute bottom.
It's the ultimate immigrant hustle story, though. He doesn't stay there. He claws his way up. He works in an ironmongery, a brass foundry.
Right. Then he gets a job as a tide waiter in the customs department.
Which is basically a dock worker checking cargo.
Essentially, yeah. But he saves enough to buy tools and finally opens his own shop again in 1845. An ivory-turning business.
And this is where we hit the central paradox of Henry Parkes. The sources call him a political genius, but a financial catastrophe.
Catastrophe is the right word. He was arguably the most visionary politician of his century, but he could not manage money. He went bankrupt at least twice, possibly 3 times, depending on how you count the insolvencies.
And this wasn't just a personal problem, was it? It actually affected his political career.
Oh, it was a massive liability. Under the laws of the time, if you were insolvent, you couldn't sit in Parliament.
So he had to resign.
He had to keep resigning his seat, sorting out his debts, usually with friends bailing him out, and then getting reelected. It was a revolving door.
So why was he so bad at it? Was it just bad luck?
No, it was neglect. Pure and simple. He admitted it himself in a letter to Clorinda. He talks about his culpable neglect of the business. He simply didn't care about the ledger. He was too busy writing poetry, writing editorials, organizing political movements.
I love that line he wrote to his sister.
Oh, yeah. He said the merchant class thought him wholly unfit for business, but the fittest of all men for Parliament.
That's a great line. And he was right. He started a newspaper, The Empire, which gave him a massive platform.
The Empire is crucial. It was a liberal, radical voice. It lost money, of course. He eventually had to sell it, but it made him famous.
Right.
In 1854, he gets elected to the Legislative Council, beating a conservative rival. And from there, it's a rocket ship. Between 1872 and 1891, he is Premier of New South Wales 5 separate times.
That is resilience. Or maybe just stubbornness. But before we get to the big federation topic, we need to touch on what the sources say was his other massive achievement: education.
This is deeply personal for him. Remember, he was breaking stones at age 8. He had no schooling.
Right.
He believed, with absolute conviction, that education was the only ladder out of poverty. So he pushed through the Public Schools Act of 1866 and then the Public Construction Act of 1880.
And these were the laws that made education free, secular, and compulsory.
Exactly. And the secular part is where the fireworks happened. He went to war with the Catholic Church, specifically Archbishop Vaughan.
Why?
Parks wanted to break the grip of religious denominations on schooling. He wanted a unified public system. It was nasty sectarian politics. He was accused of being anti-Catholic, but he won. He built the foundation of the Australian public school system.
So he's fixed the schools, he's running the colony on and off for 20 years. But the headline act is federation. For you listening who might be a bit fuzzy on the history, let's set the scene. Before 1901, what was Australia?
It was a geographical expression, not a political one. It was 6 separate British colonies: New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, and so on.
Like different countries.
They functioned like 6 different countries. They had their own governments, their own laws, and crucially, their own tariffs.
The sources mention the train situation. If I wanted to take a train from Melbourne to Sydney, what happened?
You couldn't just ride through. You had to stop at the border. At Albury-Wodonga, everyone had to get off.
No.
You had to have your luggage checked by customs officers, just like you were crossing into a foreign country.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It was. And it was expensive. If you were a business trying to sell goods across the border, you were getting hit with tariffs. Plus, the military situation was a joke.
Right.
You had these disorganized volunteer militias relying on the British Navy to save them if anything went wrong. Parks looked at this fragmented mess and saw that it wasn't sustainable.
So, 1889, the Tennerfield Oration. This is the moment in the movie where the music swells. Parks is an old man now, but he travels to this country town, stands in the School of Arts, and delivers the speech that lights the fuse. And he uses this incredibly powerful metaphor.
Yes.
He talks about the crimson thread of kinship.
The crimson thread. It's very poetic. But let's double-click on that. What did he actually mean? He was arguing that despite the annoying border checks and the tariffs, all the colonists were united by blood, by British heritage. He said, "We are one people, one destiny." He was appealing to their identity as Britons to create an Australian nation.
But this is where we have to pump the brakes and look at the flaws, part of our episode title, because when he says, "we are one people," who is he leaving out?
A significant portion of the population.
Yeah.
The crimson thread was explicitly white and explicitly British.
Right.
It completely ignored Indigenous Australians. They were here for 60,000 years, but they weren't part of Parks's kinship.
Yeah.
They weren't consulted on federation at all.
And the Constitution that came out of it.
It barely mentioned them, except to exclude them from the census.
And it wasn't just an oversight, was it? The sources point out that Parks was quite vocal about who he wanted to keep out.
Yes, this is a crucial part of the historical record. A major driver for uniting the colonies was to create a unified front for immigration control. Parks feared what he called a resurgent China. He wanted a society that was racially homogenous.
So the foundation he was pouring was explicitly for a white Australia.
Correct. The White Australia policy, which was the first law passed by the new federal parliament, has its roots in this vision.
So while we celebrate him for uniting the colonies,
We have to acknowledge that his vision of unity was based on exclusion.
it's a stark reminder that these great men are products of their time. The political mechanism he built was impressive, but the ideology driving it had these severe limitations regarding race.
Precisely. And that complexity extends to his personality, too. If his politics were messy, his personal life was.
Well, let's go back to the 17 children.
It's a lot of children. And 3 wives.
Clorinda, the first wife, endured the poverty, the bankruptcies, the 12 children she bore. She really was the rock. But after she died, Parks shocked Sydney society.
Oh.
He married his mistress, Eleanor, who was much, much younger than him.
That must have gone down well in Victorian society. It was a scandal. But then Eleanor died. And Parks, at the age of 80, marries again to Julia.
80 years old. You have to give the man credit for energy.
He had a massive ego. He needed to be the center of attention. Alfred Deakin, who would later become prime minister, described Parks brilliantly.
What do you say?
He said Parks dressed himself to appear great. He had this booming voice, this massive presence, but he would drop his H's when he spoke, a reminder of his working-class roots.
And the poetry. We can't forget the poetry. The sources say he published volumes of it, like Stolen Moments. Was it any good?
It was sincere. Let's leave it at that. It was pretty terrible Victorian verse. But he insisted on it. He wanted to be seen as a Renaissance man, statesman, poet, philosopher. He would send his poems to famous writers like Tennyson, fishing for compliments.
That screams insecurity to me. Like, he was still trying to prove he wasn't that kid breaking stones in the brick pit.
Oh, absolutely. And there was a darker side to that insecurity, too. The Kiama ghost incident.
This sounds like a Scooby-Doo episode. What was the Kiama ghost?
It was Parks at his most manipulative. In 1868, an Irishman shot Prince Alfred Queen Victoria's son at a picnic in Sydney.
Oh, wow.
The prince survived, but it caused mass panic. Parks claimed he had secret evidence of a massive Fenian plot, a Catholic conspiracy to overthrow the government.
Did he have the evidence?
None. It didn't exist. The shooter acted alone. But Parks rode that wave of sectarian fear. He used it to attack his political enemies and rally the Protestant vote.
So he was a visionary, but not afraid to play dirty.
Very dirty when his power was threatened.
So we have a vain, bad poet, terrible with money, slightly paranoid, but politically brilliant man trying to drag 6 reluctant colonies into a union. How did the actual mechanics of that go? Was everyone on board after the Tenterfield speech?
Not at all. It was a slog. It took another decade. New South Wales was nicknamed the Mother Colony, and she was very reluctant to join.
She had to be dragged into it.
Exactly. The sources mention these great faction names. The Billites, who supported the Federation Bill, and the Anti-Billites.
Anti-Billites sounds like a biblical tribe you'd want to avoid.
It does. And Western Australia almost didn't join at all. This is my favorite what-ifs from the sources. The Goldfields region, Kalgoorlie and Boulder, were full of people from the east. They were so pro-Federation that they threatened to secede from Western Australia.
Wait, so they were going to create a new colony?
Yes. They petitioned to form a new colony called Aurelia, meaning land of gold, just so they could join the new Australian nation separately.
Aurelia? That would have changed the map significantly.
It forced the WA government's hand. They realized if they didn't join, they'd lose their richest region, so they signed up. But the tragedy of all this, the real kicker, is that Parks never saw it happen.
This is the saddest part of the timeline. Federation happens on January 1st, 1901. When did Parks die?
1896.
Yeah.
5 years too early. And he didn't die in glory. He died in poverty.
He was out to square one.
Pretty much. He had sold everything. He was surviving on a government grant and charity from friends. He died in a rented house with almost nothing to his name.
There's a cartoon mentioned in the notes from the bulletin. It's titled Finis.
It's a heartbreaking image. It shows the little boy from Manly, which was a cartoon symbol for the young Australian nation, closing a book with Parks's name on it.
So his chapter was done just as the nation was beginning?
That's it.
But the sources say he did have some moments of grace at the end.
He did. On his deathbed, he reconciled with some of his fiercest rivals, like George Reed. It seems that at the very end, he understood that the movement was bigger than just him.
He'd done the heavy lifting.
And now others had to cross the finish line.
So when we step back and look at the deep dive mission stripping away the marble, what are we left with?
We're left with the realization that nation building is messy. It's not done by perfect people. It's done by people like Parks, insecure, ambitious, prejudiced, and flawed. But he had this sheer force of will. Alfred Deakin called him a titan, and he was right. Parks stumbled his way into a legacy that defines the continent.
He bound the colonies together, even if he couldn't balance his own checkbook.
Exactly. He provided the vision, even if he couldn't afford the execution.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. Parks envisioned a united Australia based on that crimson thread of British kinship. He wanted a racially homogenous society, But today, the unity of Australia exists in a multicultural form that he explicitly feared.
That is the great irony. The structure he built, the Federation, created the stability that eventually allowed that multiculturalism to flourish.
So the vessel he built carries a cargo he never intended.
Exactly.
So the question is, how does the crimson thread evolve in a modern nation? If kinship is no longer about blood or being British, what is the thread that binds us now? Is it shared values? Is it the land itself?
It's the central question of modern Australia. The thread is still there, binding us, but we've had to dye it a different color.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Thanks for helping us unpack the man behind the beard. It turns out reality is much more interesting than the statue.
Always is.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Stay curious.